Welcome to Radio Sputnik and its weekend program, The Red Line, with me, Andrew Karipko.
And Sergei Strokin.
Welcome to today's program, and this is what we want to highlight as the news-breaking stories of the week that proved to be extremely tense, dramatic, and controversial. Shortly after the truce was announced, the warring sides in Ukraine tested the Minsk peace agreement by resuming hostilities. Libya, Kingdom of Assassins on the ruins of Jamahiriya. Tens of Egyptian Christians were captured and slaughtered in Libya in a medieval-style ritual killing. And also, Lars Vilks, The Art of Drawing the Prophet and Surviving. Famous Swedish cartoonist Lars Vilks was attacked in Copenhagen and went into hiding. So let us come to our first section, Beyond the Headlines, to speak about the fragile truce in eastern Ukraine. The Minsk II Accord appears to be observed by all sides, but just barely. The drama around the Debaltseve cauldron appears to have subsided after the Ukrainian military was forced to retreat and surrender their positions. Since then, Poroshenko has requested international peacekeepers to be deployed to eastern Ukraine to observe the so-called peace. The situation still remains tense, however, and everything from rogue right-wing pro-Kiev militias to American military meddling could spoil the situation and take Ukraine back to the days of civil war.
Well, Andrew, thank you for that introduction. I totally agree with you that that was really an extremely tense and dramatic week. And you remember last week we were just discussing Minsk agreement and to what extent it can come really as a game changer in the whole Ukrainian war. And what we've seen after just hours after this truce was announced this Monday, we've seen the resumption of hostilities. And again, there was a lot of talk that probably the whole thing is masterminded by Russia. We've seen Vice President Biden and then Federica Mogherini threatening Russia with more sanctions. But now it seems that dust settled and the problem of Debaltseve is over. And it seems that no one is speaking about some sinister plot which is masterminded by Russia. And we see that all sides are getting back to Minsk agreement and peace process is back on track. This is important.
Yes, it definitely does seem like it is, but I'd like to address a question to our in-studio guest, Mr. Dmirty Polikanov, Vice President of the PIR-Center here in Moscow. Mr. Polikanov, thank you for joining us.
Hello, thank you.
Yeah, so, we're discussing Ukraine, and it seems like the game changer wasn't just Minsk II, but was Debaltseve. What do you think about that?
I would say yes, because from the military point of view, it was important for the rebels in the southeastern Ukraine to finish up their operation and actually to ensure the surrender of a significant part of the Ukrainian forces, So from military and from moral point of view, it was important for them to complete this operation before starting the ceasefire. And right now they say that rebels started to withdraw their heavy weapons from the line that divides the forces. So I think that right now, after all the tasks are completed, so the parties will start very slowly, but they will start the implementation of the Minsk II agreements.
And Mr. Polikanov, there was a lot of controversy over that Debaltseve, and just let me refer to Russia's foreign minister's statement, who explained that already during Minsk talks, Russia was pointing to the problem of Debaltseve, and our Western partners, they just tried to scale it down. They said this is not important. So this is not because of some Russia's plot, but because this problem was not taken seriously already at Minsk and that it exploded.
Absolutely. I think it was President Putin who actually pointed out that the issue of Debaltseve should be tackled seriously, and it will be a problem from the point of implementation of the ceasefire arrangements. However, the Ukrainian side said that the forces were not encircled by the rebels, so that
was in a territory. Do I get it right? That this was in a territory of the republic, self-proclaimed republic?
Yes. This was a kind of assault ground for the Ukrainian army on the territory of the republics, and it was important for the rebels in the south and eastern Ukraine to make the line more smooth, and to drive back the Ukrainian artillery and other forces from this point. So I think it is also quite important to say that Russia is sometimes blamed for violating the Minsk II agreements, but actually Russia is not a party to the conflict. So Russia is one of the mediators, and the status has been clearly stated in the declaration after the negotiations in Minsk.
But what you are saying is that about that accusations, this reminds me of a long discussion where are the keys to Ukrainian settlement? Some are saying that the keys are in Brussels. Some are saying that the keys are in Washington. Some are saying that the keys are in Moscow.
I would say in Washington. Clearly, because it is obvious that most of the things that the Ukrainian authorities do right now, they do in close coordination with Washington. And if we take into account that most of the harsh statements concerning Ukraine come out from Washington as well, well, it is clear that the keys to settlement lie there.
Mr. Polikanov, there's also other highly controversial question, some even say tricky question, and few people actually understand it. Regarding the peacekeepers, this was the talk of the week. You know that Ukrainians all of a sudden started to speak about peacekeepers. So Russia voiced reservations. But as I remember, basically, the very idea was not denied by Russia. So the devil is in details. So what are the details? Please tell us.
If you ask me, I would say that there is no other solution but peacekeepers. And I think it was actually the representatives of Donetsk and Lugansk who also mentioned like 2 or 3 weeks ago at the meeting of the consulting group, contact group, the idea of peacekeepers as such. I think it is most important the details. So it should be the UN-mandated peacekeepers, of course, and it would be very good if these peacekeepers come from neutral countries. Meaning, I don't know, there are many peacekeepers from Kenya, India, Bangladesh, and some other countries, so not related to Europe. And I think it is important for all the parties to ensure their impartiality. And the third thing is where they should be stationed, actually. And it is clear that the peacekeepers should be stationed to divide the conflicting parties, not to control the Russian-Ukrainian border.
But Ukrainians are saying that they should be EU peacekeepers. So why Russia can't put up with this? Just briefly.
Well, I would say that taking into account the European involvement in the conflict, it won't be very wise to have the European peacekeepers only. Then it should be a force which should include Russian peacekeepers as well.
Red Line.
Yes, well, all this talk about peacekeepers to settle European conflict reminds me of what had happened in Yugoslavia. So with that being said, I'd like to invite Mr. Borislav Korkodelovich, an independent political analyst based in Belgrade, onto our program. Mr. Korkodelovich, hi, and how are you?
Not so bad. We have plenty of sun this morning here in Belgrade.
Great, I'm glad to hear that. We're discussing what's happening in Ukraine and conflict resolution with Minsk II, and this entire Ukrainian war. I can't help but be reminded that it seems like Yugoslavia all over again in some ways. What's your comment on that? Is Ukraine balkanizing?
I think there is a possibility for that, quite strong possibility, at least for a frozen conflict next several years at least. What we have here in the area of former Yugoslavia is that still we don't have definite borders between new entities, and nobody knows, despite of the assurance from the main actors in the international community, that there won't be any new drawing of borders. I can't say for sure that it will happen. So if you look through the perspective or recent history of former Yugoslavia, last 25 years, I can say that we will see, unfortunately, a prolonged conflict in Ukraine with I don't think that anybody can guarantee you that the outcome will be in this or another way.
I see. Okay, well, what I'm thinking about in terms of if we can continue maybe with the former Yugoslav template, do you think that perhaps Donetsk and Lugansk can become kind of similar to how Republika Srpska is in Bosnia-Herzegovina? At least that's what some people are discussing here in Moscow.
Yeah, I think so. Because, the tendencies are, despite all the obstacles from different sides, that people tend to arrange their lives according to their traditions. And particularly if such sense is very strong, then such outcome can be achieved. So I think there is a pretty strong chance those two regions can become sort of a separate entity within the highly decentralized Ukraine.
Okay, well, Mr. Korkodelovich, thank you very much for your comments.
Red Line.
And now we're joined by Mr. Shipler, an independent political analyst based in the United States. All right, so Chris, we're discussing the situation in Ukraine, the fragile truce or ceasefire, if one will, and I'm wondering, from the U.S. perspective, does the U.S. truly welcome the ceasefire, or does it have any misgivings about it?
Well, I can only speak from a point of an observation in terms of, political rhetoric and what I read in the newspaper and things like that, and also what I look at coming out of the State Department. Not so much from Obama. He's hard to read on this. I think he's playing a very fine line here, waiting for the Republicans to take over so that they can go full bore on Russia. But no, I don't think they welcome the ceasefire at all, not based on what I see here in America.
Okay, yeah, well, it makes me think that one of the possible reasons that could be is that, the U.S. is always trying to push NATO integration. It's been probably the most hot-button issue in the entire crisis. Doesn't seem like it's going away. Do you think that NATO can play some type of a role after Minsk II, perhaps as these peacekeepers that Poroshenko's been talking about?
That's an interesting question, and I think you could go a couple different directions with that. First of all, I don't think NATO's, based on what I've heard, I'm not in NATO, so I can't speak for them, but based on what I've heard, I think NATO's goal is to recreate the Cold War, to create the Great Wall. They have, I think, geopolitically, that the biggest issue is NATO is the war machine economic arm. In other words, they want to split the EU from Russia in an economic standpoint. Because it always comes back to economics or resources, no matter how you look at it. So when you look at the Ukraine, from my perspective, when you look at the Ukraine, it was a gateway country between, if you want to think about, the China Silk Road, the EU, Putin's vision of the Central Asia and the trade deal into Europe and energy and things like that. And that's what Ukraine was that doorway between East and West. And I think that the goal was to break that relationship and to back NATO up against Russia's southern flank. I mean, it's pretty obvious if you actually stand back and get rid of the emotional content or your sense of patriotism towards whatever country you belong in, i.e. myself as an American, that if you just look at it as a game, this is a chess move to block the emergence of the BRICS platform. And that's my opinion.
Yeah, that's actually a very acute analysis because many other analysts have been saying the same thing. So just to wrap it up, because we're running out of time, what's your prognosis here? Do you think that given how important of a pivot Ukraine is for NATO and the U.S., that we're going to see a hot war or a cold peace or perhaps something else, some type of hybrid war, hybrid peace going on there? What's your take?
Well, studying Eastern Ukrainians, the Russian-backed side of the country, and it isn't just those, Donetsk and Lugansk, it's other areas. When you look at the cultural strength of these people's determination, I think we're going to end up in a very cold war between Eastern Ukraine and Western Ukraine, and I think that you're going to find the U.S. playing that pretty aggressively. And so, is it going to be a cold war? I think you're going to have hot spots continually. I don't think Poroshenko can afford to back off with the violence because he's got that right sector, i.e. for lack of a better term, nobody wants to use the word, but, they're Nazis. And so they don't want to stop anything. They hate the Russians. They want to destroy them. So there's a lot of politics in the Ukraine going on here that can be played at. I think Europe is scared to death they're going to be stuck with the bill or have a hot war on their land or on their border. I think Putin realizes he's going to be caught in this thing no matter what he does, and it's going to cost him billions of dollars because he can never abandon the people in the East. So, and I think the U.S. will play that against each other constantly, and any chance they can, they will back a violent action. That's my opinion.
Okay, Chris, unfortunately, that's all the time that we have, so we really want to thank you for participating. And right now, this concludes our first section about Ukraine, so I'd like to thank all of our guests for participating, beginning with our in-studio guest, Mr. Dmirty Polikanov, Vice President of the PIR-Center, which is an independent think tank here in Moscow, Mr. Borislav Korkodelovich, an independent political analyst based in Belgrade, and Mr. Chris Shipler, an American political commentator. Following in our program, we have Libya, Kingdom of Assassins on the Ruins of Jamahariya, and Lars Vilks, The Art of Drawing the Profit and Surviving. Stay with us.